when President Trump went after the 4 freshman congresswomen dubbed the Squad who've been fiercely critical of his administration. It raised an old question with new urgency. When is it okay to label something racist in straight news coverage? That ugly chant was directed at Congresswoman Ilhan Omar at a Trump rally Wednesday, 3 days after Trump said Omar, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Rashida Tlaib, and Ayanna Pressley should, quote, go back and fix the totally broken and crime-infested places from which they came, countries whose governments are a complete and total catastrophe. For the record, Omar emigrated from Somalia as a child. The other 3 were born right here. Covering these comments, many outlets used the R word.
His racist tweets ignited a firestorm.
Doubling down on racist tweets.
Not backing away from his stunningly racist attack.
But others were more restrained. In just one segment, NBC News showed how many ways there are to almost call something racist without fully committing.
Widely slammed as racist, a demeaning phrase often used by racists.
He fans the flames of racial resentment.
Also avoiding racist, the New York Times. And while NPR used the term repeatedly, Keith Woods, NPR's VP of Newsroom Diversity and Training, said that was a mistake.
The urge that we have now to label things and people racist is a slope that we will slide down so fast and damage the instrument of journalism.
But based on the past week, that argument seems to be losing. So for viewers who didn't have a chance to read Keith Wood's column, it's worth highlighting that, at least as I read it, I'm pretty sure he thinks that what the president had to say was racist. But he is afraid that by using a term that connotes moral judgment, the news media will cease to be seen as trustworthy and therefore won't be able to call attention to the things we want to call attention to. So it's a strategic argument rather than an argument based on accuracy, which might be the only thing that I've heard that convinces me that there's anything wrong with labeling the statements that the president made on Twitter racist, because to me, they certainly fit the bill. Where do you guys come down?
You know, I think Marty Barron, the executive editor of the Washington Post, put it well when he said, we're going to go with the term racist because the whole idea of, you know, go back to where you came from is the definition of racism. It's a racist trope that's been used for a long time. You know, I've managed to go my whole career with almost never calling anyone a racist except for an occasional Dapper O'Neill or George Wallace or something. This is racist, and it should be described as such.
Kelly, what do you think? Oh, go ahead.
This is the kind of debate that we had around the L word, you know, whether you should call a politician what they've said that's a lie. I mean, for many years, as a journalist, you're out there, it's like, well, it's something that untruths, and even now some news organizations still struggle with whether you call it a lie. I don't know that we have to have this uniform policy to say, okay, this is what you must call it racist if they say X, right? I think that news organizations should do what they feel is right for their audience. It is very difficult, I think, from a moral standpoint, to judge what is in someone's heart, right? And I think by the definition of is someone a racist, you would have to know what is inside their heart, not just what comes out of their mouth. And so I think that's where a lot of people get hung up. So because of that, I think, look, if you are a news organization, you want to call it racist, go ahead and call it that. If you want to use something that it is a term that some refer to as racist, then I think that's fine. I don't think that we have to find the perfect name to call it for everyone.
I think that it's interesting that there's this whole debate about whether or not to call the tweets racist when we're describing the tweets. We're not saying the president is racist, and I can see how people can say that there's a moral issue there, you don't know what its heart. You can see what's in the tweet's heart. I mean, it's written there, right?
The tweet has a heart?
If the tweet has a heart, it is in those characters that were printed out. And go back where you came from is given as a classic example of a racially motivated phrase used to attack someone. And it's right there in the tweet. So I don't see why there's a big question about whether you're calling the tweet racist. I do see why there'd be a lot of discussion and hesitancy to call a person racist, though I know people can come down on either side of that argument right now.
I would agree with you. So our definition from the journalist has been about the tweets and what he said. Now you can take a leap and decide if pattern and practice would suggest that the person issuing the tweets is one or not, and you can decide whether you want to take time looking into the heart or not on that. But definitely the definition of is the action. So you're looking for what is the action. He's performed the action. There you have it. I think it's appropriate for us to say it. I don't usually disagree with Keith Woods because I think he's, so good at this. I understand his concern, but we had the same discussion as Dan mentioned about the lie. And the way that I view saying lie or not is whether or not there's been an extensive pattern in practice, because it's the intent around mistruth, untruth, whatever people are saying. And it was very clear early on it was intentional. So it's enough of saying untrue, seemed to not understand, got it wrong, whatever. The guy is clearly lying, so say it.
And in this case, the focus is clearly on the race of these 4 freshman congresswomen.
That's correct.
He has never said that Bernie Sanders needs to go back where he belongs. He didn't, his entire campaign was based on Make America Great because there are a slew of problems with America. So to say that these women don't love America and therefore should return to where they come from, the assumption is that because they're of color, there is some place for them to return to.
Let me ask you. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, this is actually easier than calling something a lie, because you really do have to read their mind to know whether it's a lie or not. But we know whether a tweet is racist or not.
Let me ask all of you. I already made it clear that I'm okay with that labeling myself, but just to play devil's advocate, there are going to be some viewers who are going to say, wait a minute, you've said that go back where you came from is a textbook definition of racism. Isn't it really a textbook definition of xenophobia or nativism? Because that same language was used with Italians, with Irish, probably used with Germans, like
that doesn't
President
make
Trump's
it right better now.
Racist.
I'm not saying it makes it.
I think people said it to me when I was growing up in a part of Florida where there weren't a lot of African Americans, and it was always go back to where you came from, go back to Africa. And as a kid, I'd say, well, I wasn't born in Africa.
And one of the synonyms
there's
for
racist, whatever your tendencies, it's racism, whatever. When someone says that, yes.
And one of the synonyms in the thesaurus for xenophobia is racism.
Right. But also, those people that you mentioned, yes, they were told that as well, and they moved past. It always comes back to persons of color. I have heard it. Ask any person of color. At some point, most of them have heard it.